Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary War! I know, I thought of it at the end of the last episode. My entire mind exploded. So yeah, we're talking about the Brothers' War once again. Now, it is worth knowing that today's episode is going to be very much just kind of everything that happens in the past prior to the final battle. The reason is because I want to focus on things that Thanos does, things that happen on both sides of the war, and kind of just give you a quick overview, because a lot of it is really interesting stuff if you're reading it. Otherwise, I'm just going to be describing what happens in World War One. Like that's essentially what happens. So I actually have a list of some of the things that are worth mentioning.
Do you
here.
remember the Battle of Fort Sumter?
I mean, that's pretty close to the kind of stuff we have here.
Okay.
So basically, I'm going to just
Back in my day, we remembered the Alamo.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about the whole deal with that School of Mages that I was talking about.
Okay.
So
Strixhaven.
Ronom Lake. Ronom has been mentioned a few times in Ice Age stories.
And that's that one you can put in your lawnmower.
Rotom, okay, yeah. So essentially what happens is that they talk about how in Ronom there's nothing there because there used to be Gixians there.
Oh, like the washing machine.
There used to be an entire, basically a giant hole in the ground that was supposedly able to lead directly to Phyrexia. There's supposed to be a giant portal to Phyrexia there. And so the idea is that they have an artificer named Nod and a magician named Duck, both of whom are supposed to be Astronaut and Thanos respectively, right? Now, the thing is they don't really explain what it's supposed to be, but it's most likely meant to have some kind of connection to the Conclave of Mages, which was a group that existed during the whole Ice Age deal, and eventually you have the whole thing that happens with Lord Ith and Barrel's Cage and all that sort of thing.
Doesn't Ice Age happen after this?
Yes, that's why.
What?
Yeah, the Ice Age is about to happen. It's about to start up over the next few hundred years.
Oh, everything is getting cold.
Yes.
Oh.
That's why everything was getting cold. Because the Ice Age is happening. The shard is forming.
See, I was hoping this would bring a lot of stuff to light for me.
Yes.
Timeline's very confusing because Urza's always there.
Also, real quick side note, Joda in the Ice Age stories, I don't know if we'll ever actually cover Ice Age. We probably will at some point, but just a real quick side note, Joda is immortal because he found the Fountain of Youth by accident and jumped in it to avoid getting attacked by goblins.
Ah.
And he spent a long time in the fountain trying to avoid it.
Solid.
That's literally the entire deal for why he's immortal.
Otherwise, he's just a good mage.
Yeah. And the reason he's such a good mage is because he's immortal and had so much time to study. So, yeah, there's that. Now, it is worth knowing, again, Jarsil does find, if you look at the
Just like, Jody, can you come out to play? I'll come out to play later. You said that yesterday. I've been saying that the past 300 years. No way.
The gate to Phyrexia says, it's a card. It says, the warm rain of grease on my face immediately made it clear I had entered Phyrexia. This is from the diary of Jarsil. So he does make it there, and he does wind up finding Phyrexia. Now, I really want a real quick last note. The last important thing Kayla does, we kind of ended it with her just kind of fading into obscurity. It is annoying she did write the Antiquities war poem. I want to make that clear.
Oh, wow.
Remember how we talked about that in the first one?
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that that wasn't retconned. That still does happen. It's worth mentioning. And I'm sure that somebody is going to comment something along the lines of, well, she also wrote that, so she's not exactly forgotten kind of thing. But yeah, that's an important part of her character. Now we jump into the actual stuff that happens in Chapter 3.
If you use the Antiquities War, let me know. You sound like you don't have very useful cards in your deck.
Wow. That was unnecessarily messed up. So Chapter 3 is all about the fall of Krug. We actually saw Krug fall in the Brothers' War novel. It happened in both cases. And it's a really cool moment because we have a character named Sanwell and his brother Rendal. Rendal appeared in the original book.
Adam Sanwell!
I'll accept that. Now, the thing is that Rendal talks to Thanos and asks him about his brother. And at the same time, and he's like, oh, well, I already deployed them to go off and do all this other stuff. And at the same time, during this story, Sanwell asks about Rendal. And Thanos is like, oh, he's already been deployed to do all this other stuff. So, Thanos is in control of all of Urza's army, and he's the one giving them their experimental and more powerful machines. So essentially what we have is Rendal goes off. We don't really see his story happen here. And he's in the Ornithopter group, which fare much better than the people on the ground. Sanwell is given a special mech suit of sorts. Essentially, there's these 3 giant units, literal like absolute units behind him, and they each of them basically has to do its own like. There's these. It's called Sword 1, Sword 2, and Sword 3 kind of thing, and they have these power poles essentially, these little remotes that whatever they do movement wise, the robot will mimic. And so like if he wheels back and he goes like that, then it does it. And the rod itself is designed because he has a sword, and he can just take out the sword and start wailing on things. And so there's these giant golems, and he can just press a button and command it to do something else, and it can do it itself. And so we have this really epic scene where Sanwell is just like kind of running, and his machine is running along like around him, and then the other people are also running, and he's got like a whole team, and they're all working together trying to defeat all of Mishra's forces. And Mishra's got his own like group of things going on, right?
The Brothers' War sounds like if the bad guys from Avatar were up against like a team of predators.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So, yeah. That's not wrong. That's not entirely wrong. So
like, you notice none of these are protagonists. Have you met her?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, no, it's a war. Nobody is good in this war. They're all bad, and they make other people bad. Thanos was a good guy. Ashnod, absolutely evil, but that's only because the world made her evil. It's a whole Frankenstein scenario. So essentially what happens is Thanos does that, he sends them off and they do their own deals. And it's a really cool story, and eventually it ends with a dragon engine absolutely decimating everything and everyone, and Sanwell essentially being left there among this wreckage. And he's thinking, okay, I'm going to die. I've been shot, I've been stabbed, I've been all messed up. It's over for me. He actually just told his robot destroy everything in sight, and then he let it go, and it's running a rampage until it's destroyed by the Mishran forces. And so that's happening, and so Sam was like, okay, I did my best, it's time for me to die. As this happens, this spirit appears in front of him, and it's looking around, and Ola says, no, not yet. And then it fades away. Obviously, that was Teferi.
Oh, I was going to hope it was Christopher Walken.
No, it was Teferi.
Adam Sandwell. I have this remote.
So essentially, what winds up happening is that Teferi sees him, and he's completely ignoring him, and he's just noticing that this is not where he wanted to be. This is because he wants to find where the Silex blast happened, and so Sandwell sees that, and he's like, "Death just told me it's not my time yet."
Just imagine Teferi goes to this whole thing, just like, oh, it's not here. So Healy, it's not here. What is Death saying? Kaya, where are we supposed to go now? Anybody, can you recalibrate the thing?
That's essentially what's happening, yeah. And so, but basically what happens is Sanwell's like, okay, I can live. And so he gets up and he lives. And we see in the Brothers' War that Rendell also survives.
Wow.
So the two of them survived the war.
Do they have cards?
Sanwell does in the new set. He's that white card like that with the bar, and there's the machine behind him doing the same pose.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm definitely using it in the Urza deck. So basically,
were you planning something?
No.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not in a war with you. I'm not trying to get your stone, your die. I'm not trying to steal your die. I don't know what you're talking about. So essentially, what's happening is that's the entirety of Sword 1. It's so good. It's such a good visceral representation of the horrors of war. And if you want to talk about visceral representations of the horrors of war, you just look at the next one right after it. So that was called Sword 1. The next one is The Ink of Empires. The Ink of Empires is the blood of the innocent. And they rewrite history.
Okay.
And so essentially what we have with the Ink of Empires is this entire deal about Tomakul. Tomakul is an area that has been covered in trenches. And essentially it's just this gridlock of several years of this. This is a several-year-long war, a battle that lasts years. And it's just them slowly moving the line back and forth across these trenches. And it's just a war of attrition, but they're both just pouring more and more resources into it. It's not essentially a proxy war, but it's basically just it's not even an actual thing. It's just these two forces throwing resources so that they don't let the other one have it. And it's cool because the entire story is from one of Mishra's soldiers' perspective, which you'll actually, if you have the Mishra deck, you'll see this particular red legendary creature show up in that deck.
Oh, that one's old bordered.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe they all are. All the cards in that whole deal are supposed to be old borders. So yeah, his name is Farid, and Farid is basically he's a veteran of sorts. He's been in this war this whole time. He's living in the trenches. He knows exactly how like certain things mean. If they give you new food and new clothes to like mend your stuff, you're probably gonna go die in the next day. if they, stuff like that, like if whenever things are getting like good, it's because there's a catch. And so essentially the way he survived is by basically just hanging back whenever things start getting nasty, and because he knows that the war doesn't actually matter. It's just people throwing bodies against robots. There's new recruits, and he even tells them like, I have never killed anyone. I've only destroyed machines, because that's all I've ever had to fight. Now that said, the story progresses, and he goes on this little expedition for one of the generals, and the general's like, look, if they catch you, I had nothing to do with this. You're on your own. But make sure you bring back a full basket.
Wow.
And so basically what he does with his three buddies, they go across enemy lines to this broken ornithopter, and they're hiding inside of it. And then
Star Wars style.
Yeah, essentially, but 4 more of the other side of Urzen army, 4 people come into it, and they're like, you got the stuff? And he's like, yeah, we got the stuff. And so they trade resources with each other so that they can both have the stuff, because like that's just how it's war. These people are used to it, and they both are trying to speak the other's language. They use a very broken dialect. It's like a kind of a pidgin version that combines the two of them.
Okay.
And so they're talking to each other, and it's just really cool because it's so brutal and unnecessary because it's war. But then you get to see these little moments where like it's just 8 human beings hanging out, just living
down the street.
That's right.
Same old thing.
They did last week, which is killing each other. And so basically while this is happening, you have Farid, and Farid basically goes, don't be on the front lines tomorrow. We're going to attack. And the other one's like, we know. We're prepared for you. And he's like, good to know. But they can't tell anybody else. They're just basically preparing each other.
Yeah.
So what happens...
Like, I like these guys.
Yeah, essentially, because they're just normal people.
Uh-huh.
And so essentially what winds up happening is that they hold back, and there's the new recruit, and he's trying to keep him alive. So he's just holding him the entire time, and as they're going through this war zone. And it feels very much like what you would expect from a World War I, World War II movie, where it's just these trenches, these pits that have been made by explosions, and they're puddles of water and blood and filth, and there's rats everywhere. Like the
and
stuff.
they fight over in Infinity Stone, the good guy gets frozen in ice.
Essentially. So basically what ends up happening is that by the end of this whole story, Farid just kind of, he survives. Which is kind of the best he can hope for.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, and I mean...
Especially with Asnar as your general.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, what's funny though is that all this is happening, and like they get into this other trench, and there's this little like note left, like saying our thank you for like saving us, thank you for telling us, our gratitude, and it cuts off after that with Farid's life. We don't know what happens to him. What we do know is that Teferi's at this battlefield, because what he's been doing, as it turns out, is he's been looking for moments where there's just pockets of time, gashes in time, of just a lot of death has happened. Uh-huh. That's what he's looking for. And so he just keeps going to these battles as a result. And while he's there...
So he basically just has a really bad index for going into this.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like, everybody died. This is just war. Everybody died. This is just war.
Yeah, exactly.
This is just war.
So he's having a really hard time finding it, essentially. Okay. And what he does see, though, are some Phyrexians, or Gixians. And they're like, are you the voice inside our heads? And he's like, I'm out.
He just gets back, and they're just like, what happened? I got in the mind. I was almost inside the mind of Phyrexian. What? Tell you later.
Yeah, like, so essentially what happened was that the Gixians were collecting body parts for Ashnod. Earlier in this episode, in the story, we actually see transmogrants, which were Ashnod's basic method of taking a corpse, taking some artifice, kind of mixing them together, and then putting a helmet on so nobody could recognize the face. You have a transmogrant, a 3/3 artifact zombie.
Wow.
Yeah, it's extremely messed up. They're basically flesh golems. And so she would create these creatures, and they're just like...
So she was very significant. That sounds really unique.
Oh, no, yeah, it's crazy. That's why she had her own altar. An altar that she would put things on.
Until now, and now she has 2 creatures.
Yeah, it's true. And the creatures are insane as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was basically...
If I was building a Mishra deck, I'd sacrifice Mindslaver twice, except it's going to be called Mishra's Warform.
It's true. Wait, what?
If I was.
Oh, okay. You don't want my Power Stone... I mean, my die, don't you?
I want you dead.
Oh, okay.
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Like, if I were to go to war with you with a deck that would war against the deck you might be building,
yes,
it would theoretically be, I don't care about your stone, I want you dead since I gave up on the stone.
Interesting. So I can have your stone.
After
your
kill
die.
You.
I can have your die.
No.
Okay. So I can have your die.
That's not part of the theoretical
if I
war.
Die.
First of all, don't die.
Okay.
Second of all, no, that's not part of the theoretical war. I'm keeping my stones for collection.
But I need your die. That was the entire episode. Thanks, guys. We've actually gone through 4 of the stories. There's actually...
It's been very fun. I hope you guys are tuning in. This is actually
like,
breezed by. If I didn't have to watch Corgis, we'd keep going.
Yeah, like this is actually like 4 stories that are all really good, and I highly suggest you read them. The next one, the 5th story of the past, we're actually not going to cover until we get through all the modern day stuff.
Okay.
Because that's going to kind of bring everything together. It's pretty cool.
I'm hyped. Leave a like if you like the video and subscribe. Don't miss any more Brothers War if you've missed any. Go back and watch if you've missed any already.
Yeah.